Hello and welcome to Let's Didgeridoo with me and talk about life as a highly sensitive person. And I wanted to create this video this week because I have a really big project I'm working on that actually helps highly sensitive people make improvements to their lives without really having to put a whole lot of energy in at the beginning, because a lot of HSPs want to improve their career or their relationships or their health, etc., or their overall life satisfaction, but don't really have the energy to do so because they're already so overwhelmed and exhausted. So it's kind of like the conundrum, right? That they want to make progress, but they don't have the energy to do the thing that would help them make progress. So I'm working on a project right now to help HSPs be able to kind of shift their lives from the inside out, and it's really cool. So if you're interested in that, keep tabs on me because I will be announcing more information about that soon. But that's taking up a lot of my energy and time at the moment, but I still wanted to be able to upload something to YouTube that was fun for me and valuable for you, but that also wasn't going to take a lot of prep, and this seemed like a fun idea. So let's doodle together and talk about life as an HSP. So I have a little doodle up on the screen here that I kind of roughed in. I tend to like little mountain rangey, foresty, lakey type of thingies. So that's what this is. And it's just gonna be like the weirdest, silliest little doodle because I need to use most of my brain power to talk to you. So there's my disclaimer. And I don't know where this video is gonna go, but I'm just gonna kind of talk and we'll see what happens. But I do want to preface it by saying, of course, whatever I talk about is going to be from my life experience. I'm a highly sensitive person and a wellness coach, so I do have a lot of background in holistic health and things like that, and I've studied a lot of psychology and about healthy relationships and all these types of things. So you hear a little bit of how I perceive things through the education and experiences I've had. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. I hope whatever I share with you is helpful. So here we go. So we're going to see if I can multitask. So life as a highly sensitive person. So obviously I've been a highly sensitive person my whole life, as most of us are, because it is a genetic trait that we are born with. I come from a family of 4 HSPs. So myself and my sibling and both of my parents are all highly sensitive people. So part of being an HSP is very likely having someone in your close family also be a highly sensitive person that you inherited the trait from. And so on that note as well, since the HSP trait is something that we inherit, it is an innate trait. It is something that we cannot remove or get rid of, which I think is, a lot of HSPs who are struggling tend to wish that they could get rid of their highly sensitive trait. If you've seen any of my other videos around how to have a healthy mindset around being a highly sensitive person, you know that I say that that's kind of like the wrong approach. It's a logical deduction that you think, okay, I'm an extremely sensitive person and maybe this has caused me some challenges or some heartache in my life, so I'm going to try to rid myself of it. But, and I used to be this way too, so not throwing any shade or judgment to anyone here, but just to kind of talk about that process of, it's a logical thing to think, well, this is obviously what's causing my issues, so I want to get rid of it. But the thing is, we can't really get rid of it because it's an innate part of ourselves. So having that approach of how do I be less sensitive isn't exactly the way to solve our problems, even though it seems like it is. And actually what I've found is that we need to learn how to work with our trait, because ultimately at the end of the day, your sensitivity is something that's deeply a part of you. So the more energy you put towards trying to almost fight against something that's an innate part of who you are, you're kind of wasting your energy because you're putting all your effort towards fighting a battle that you can't necessarily quote unquote win, right? So it's like, it makes much more sense to put your energy towards, okay, so if I have this thing and it's going to be with me my whole life, how do I find a way to actually benefit from this, or to view it in a positive light, or to use it to my advantage, make peace with it, etc., etc. But in my mind, like, it's not just making peace with it. Because I've gotten to a place where I genuinely love being a highly sensitive person. And if I did have the choice to rid myself of it, I don't think that I would. It's something that I very much deeply value in who I am. I'm gonna pause for a minute because my computer sounds like it's gonna explode and I wanna make sure I don't lose what I just did. Okay, sorry about that. I'm working with an extremely old computer, so we're gonna have to just nicely pet the dinosaur while I do this. But anyway, what the heck was I talking about? Right, so I actually deeply enjoy being a highly sensitive person now that I've learned a lot about the trait and understand exactly how it works, and in myself at least, and why things can be so challenging. I think part of the reason why discovering you're a highly sensitive person is so healing and profound is because you actually start to understand yourself, and understanding yourself is one of the biggest key components to living a happy and healthy life, because you actually understand what it is that you need to do to be able to take care of yourself and to be happy and healthy. You can't do those things if you don't know what to do, if you don't know what the guiding principle is, right? If you don't know what makes you happy or healthy, it's hard to make choices in alignment with that. So anyway, learning about the trait within yourself, super important, and understanding how being a highly sensitive person has influenced the way that you have maybe, has shaped who you are. And so part of what I want to talk about as well is kind of like a developmental psychology tangent. So what does it mean to be a highly sensitive person? Well, highly sensitive people are people that have a genetic component to their nervous system that makes it more sensitive than the average person. And what does that mean? What does it mean to have a highly sensitive nervous system? Well, it means that you are more influenced and affected by the things in your surroundings, whether they're positive or negative. So I always say being a highly sensitive person, like the trait itself, is a neutral thing. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's just part of, it's just another aspect of who you are. I could go into a whole tangent about how the highly sensitive trait is purposeful because it continues to be passed down genetically, and in terms of theory of evolution, it's not going anywhere. So clearly there's a purpose for it. But anyway, so fundamentally, it's a neutral thing, right? But it depends on, so growing up in our developmental psychology from the ages of, 0 to 7 specifically, or especially, we are really susceptible and influenced by our surroundings. We basically use all of what we're learning and seeing in our world around us to make sense of the world, to figure out how the world works, to figure out what it is we're capable of, what's possible for us, what's normal, right? And so if we are highly sensitive people, that means that we are even more, we're absorbing the things around us, whether good or bad, at almost like a higher rate or in more depth than the average kid. So that has the potential, right? It has an increased potential to be good or bad, depending on what types of influences are around us. So being a highly sensitive person may have set you up with some things that are challenging that you absorbed, right, when you were a kid. And it also could have set you up with some really good things as well. So depending on what your environment nurtured or influenced you in, being highly sensitive could be a really good thing, or it could be a challenge. And I think knowing those things about ourselves is huge, right? Because again, the more you know about yourself, the more easy it is to make decisions that will be in alignment with what will actually make you happy and healthy. So for me, for example, there were some things in my childhood that I think was able to nurture and grow because of having positive influences in these areas around me, as well as being a highly sensitive person. So being super creative, that was definitely something that I leaned into, that I believe was aided by the fact that I'm a highly sensitive person. Maybe it gave me more of an artistic and creative way of looking at things, or absorbing those types of creative influences around me that were positive, and encouragement to explore those things. And there's also definitely some things that I absorbed that were negative that affected me on a deep level because I'm so sensitive. I got some messages when I was younger that, in the ways that I interpreted them, whether they were intended that way or not, that I was not good enough, or that I was not capable on my own, or, kind of putting my needs behind other people, seeing examples of that in my life of people around me that were doing that, or things that were going on in my family that kind of encouraged me to do that. And again, like any person, whether you're highly sensitive or not, goes through these types of developmental things as a kid, where you learn from your environment and you kind of make sense of it based off of the influences that you have around you, right? But as a highly sensitive person, we are even more susceptible to really taking those things, like deeply ingraining them and being affected by them. You know, whereas like maybe a non-highly sensitive child would be in a situation like, let's say there's a, you know, a classroom or playroom type of situation where like that, not the person who's not as highly sensitive would just be focusing on their, you know, building their blocks or whatever, and the HSP might be actually picking up on and listening to like the conversations the adults are having and paying attention to those like little social cues that are coming from like, oh, the caretaker that I'm with is stressed right now, and I sense that and feel that. Whereas a non-HSP might be able to kind of tune those things out better and focus just on the task at hand and not maybe go as far into like the meaning making of, you know, what that means about themselves. Again, this is all just like my understanding from what I've learned about the trait and what I think makes sense in my own theory. But I think thinking about all this stuff in the context of being a highly sensitive person has really helped me not only understand myself, but also have compassion for the ways that I've deeply absorbed a lot of these types of messages that I've had to work through in my life. But like, again, ultimately at the end of the day, I think being a highly sensitive person is actually a beautiful thing. You know, when I think about what it means to be a highly sensitive person, I think about the human experience, and that being a highly sensitive person means you're more in touch with what's going on in your surroundings and on a sensory level, right? And so the human experience is all about sensory experiences and our emotions, and HSPs, by definition, are experiencing those things at an even more intense level. That could be a bad thing, or it could be a good thing. It's basically like life is dialed up. All of life is dialed up as an HSP, right? So I think being a highly sensitive person is the most profound way to experience human life. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Whether that's good or bad, I think depends on how supported and resourced we are and how knowledgeable we are about ourselves and what would help us be happy and healthy as highly sensitive people. And the more, you know, that we have that kind of knowledge, the better our discernment skills are. And this is something I, you know, plan to talk about a lot more on my channel, but also just in general is something that I'm like really a big part of my mentality around thriving as a person, but especially as an HSP, is discernment skills. And, you know, unless we've had really good examples when we were young, we kind of have to teach ourselves some things, or like make a point to recognize the things that maybe we don't know as much about that we need to go learn about in order to have better discernment skills. Like, for example, if you don't have a really good examples of really healthy relationships and what that looks like in your life growing up, then you have no really good frame of reference to base your discernment skills off of. So if you are someone, let's say, who's highly sensitive and you have struggled in the past with your relationships, and you don't really, like if you reflect on when you were younger or whatever, and you don't really feel like you had excellent examples of what really healthy relationships look like, then learning about what that looks like and what kinds of dynamics you should be looking for, like in a partner or in friendships, then your discernment skills are much more elevated, because you can actually see and understand and recognize what's good for you and what isn't. So, and I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen in myself, as well as like many other HSPs, for highly sensitive people in general, is that because our brains are very much sort of set up to be attuned to our surroundings, and especially like social emotional cues of those around us, we can tend to be, especially if we aren't taught otherwise, very externally focused, especially if we're told we're too sensitive, and then we begin to not trust our own senses about what we feel and perceiving in our lives is actually accurate. We start to then very heavily prioritize other people's perceptions of us, other people's emotions, and other people's thoughts and opinions and indications about what's real, what's right for us, etc., etc. And that obviously can be an issue because you start to not only focus on everyone else's feelings and needs and experiences, but you lose touch with your own sense of what's right for you. So those of you that have been on my channel for a little while or have heard about any of my other kind of teachings around how to thrive as an HSP, you'll hear me talk about that. Getting back in touch with your own sense of what's right for you and your own intuition and your own senses and trusting those things is a big part of what I have found, needs to happen for the highly sensitive person to really live a healthy and happy and fulfilling life. And that's why that is such a huge portion of my online program for HSPs and is a big part of what I found is just super important because so many of us have been trained and conditioned by our surroundings, again, the messages we get in our environment, that we are not to be trusted by our own selves because we are too sensitive, too emotional, whatever. So when, and if you think about it, if you're told that over and over again, you're essentially getting the message that whatever is going on inside of you that's telling you how you feel or what's happening even, or your interpretations of your surroundings is somehow broken, right? It's too much, it's too sensitive, it's not accurate. It's not a good indication of truth, etc. Whatever wording is kind of what comes out of that. So you can see how that would kind of have a cascade effect in your life where you think, well, okay, so if I'm being told by many people around me that I'm too sensitive, that my internal systems are off as a gauge, then in order to have a good, healthy life and make good decisions and all these things, I can't really trust myself. I'm going to have to look to other people to have a good indication of what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. And in the beginning of my career as a highly sensitive coach or a coach for highly sensitive people is noticing a trend of wow, HSPs really have a hard time making decisions on their own. They really just don't have that feeling of trust within themselves. And it makes perfect sense if you're told over and over again that you're too sensitive. So a big part of thriving as an HSP, I think, is getting back in touch with those things and learning to really trust yourself. And, for me personally, I realized for myself experientially is that, I had been in relationships and things, situations before where I was kind of discouraged from trusting my intuition and where I started to not really think that I was, the more you kind of get those messages that you're too sensitive or whatever. And so I started to realize over time, discounting my intuition was actually hurting me more than it was supposed to be something that would help, right? It was to discount my own internal sensors and use other people's ideas and stuff around me as my gauge. But the more I kind of implemented that strategy, thinking that was the solution, I started to realize, wait a second, this isn't actually this is worse for me. Because now I have no sense of self. I have no idea who I am or what I want, or, there are harmful things going on around me that I'm no longer, my internal alarm system is no longer sending me the messages it's supposed to send me. Because I've been stuffing it down and turning down the volume on it. So a lot of the times HSPs will get upset or annoyed at themselves, oh, why am I so sensitive here? Or why do I have to notice this? Or why, I bring this up to my friends or my partner or my family and they're like, oh my God, you're reading into things, whatever. But actually, there are plenty of reasons why, again, this is where those discernment skills, I think, come in. Because obviously you don't want to be hyper vigilant and reading into every little thing, but understanding that there are reasons why our systems send us messages like that. That you're not supposed to completely ignore those things, especially if you are in some sort of dangerous situation or harmful environment, etc. Being a highly sensitive person actually is an incredible survival skill, and I would really encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're, on the journey to want to live a better life as a highly sensitive person, to actually start having some appreciation for those skills and those tendencies. And learn more about what healthy relationships and environments actually look like, because that'll help you be able to understand and use your rational mind in those situations where you think, should I be concerned about this, you'll be able to tell, like, okay, is this just my anxiety or whatever? Is this just a fear of mine? Is this just like a childhood trigger thing that's happening right now and I don't actually need to be like reading deeply into this and freaking out about it? Or is this like, no, this is actually like a very, very useful little nugget of information that my systems are warning me about that I should pay attention to, and it does kind of feel like this is not a good environment for me. It's all about balance. It's like everything in life. It's like you don't want to be leaning so far into that you're, you know, like paranoid, but you don't want to completely discount those things because they can actually be really useful and they're there for a reason. So that's sort of that that idea there. So now this part's gonna get really tedious, but I think it'll look cool when it's done. We're just gonna make some grassy things in here. You know, I guess something else I'll talk about that seems pretty common with HSPs that I could share a little bit about my own journey is that, you know, a lot of HSPs struggle with anxiety. And I'm actually noticing, like, just in general in the world, it seems like a lot of people are struggling with anxiety these days. But it makes sense because we are literally being bombarded by so much information and just so overwhelmed all the time. And there's so much like fear crap stuff going on in the news and whatever that it's like, how are we supposed to not be anxious? I actually struggled a lot with anxiety and panic attacks when I was younger, and that actually had to do with a lot of like physical symptoms I was having that I did not understand. So I kind of felt like very out of control in my own body when these things would happen, and that was where my anxiety came from. And you know, being a highly sensitive person comes with being more in touch with your sensations and your surroundings, as well as like deeply processing information. Again, this is where that kind of like positive negative seesaw comes in, because being really in touch with your surroundings can make you incredibly observant and very insightful, and like deeply processing that information can help you come up with really good ideas and be incredibly creative and innovative. But it can also kind of, you know, make you tend towards feeling overwhelmed and thinking very deeply and kind of ruminating and maybe working yourself up a little bit, right? If it starts to lean towards the negative. So again, it's like so much of this is understanding your trait, understanding how it can be really beneficial to you, and recognizing when it's kind of crossed the line into not so much helpful anymore, like when it's crossed the line into dysfunction. So like I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day who we were talking about anxiety and kind of planning for the worst case scenario and like thinking about all that stuff over and over in your mind. And for me, you know, what's helped me in the past and kind of what I've told clients and in my teachings about like how to manage anxiety and how to kind of switch things so that it's more beneficial to you, because I wouldn't want to completely rid that part of my brain that thinks about like preparing for the worst case scenario, because it's useful. I mean, like thinking about planning for a trip or something. Like I'm the kind of person that when I plan for a trip to go on vacation or something, you know, I'm the one that's like thinking about every single possible scenario in which I might need something and I need to pack it so that I can pack it so that I'm like very much overly prepared. But once I get to that place, then I can actually enjoy the vacation because my thoughts are no longer preoccupied with worrying about something that I like didn't pack that I would have needed. So going back to what I was telling this person I was talking to about anxiety is it's like, if you can ask yourself, like, at what point does this not become helpful anymore? Because if I packed my suitcase for like every possible scenario of things that could go wrong or whatever that I might need, and then still continue to think about it, that would be no longer helpful. It would be like, this is occupying my thoughts in a way that's no longer allowing me to be present or enjoy my experience. And you know, most of the time, none of those bad things that you've come up with actually end up happening. So the question is, you can ask yourself, if you're still like in this thought loop or thinking about this stuff, like, is this productive? Is this helping me in some way? If it is, if it's helping you plan and prepare and feel more secure going forward or whatever it is, or like processing something so that you don't make the same mistake again, etc., that's useful. When it starts teetering into the point of like, I'm going over the same thing over and over again and I'm just creating this state in my nervous system that's chronically stuck in these fear-based thoughts, then no, it's not helpful to you anymore. So again, like so many HSPs are like, I want to get rid of my sensitivity, it's ruining my life. But is it though? Or are you just misusing it? Or are you just mismanaging it? because like a lot of these things that we tend towards, like these tendencies or skill sets or whatever you want to call it that we have, are actually incredibly useful as long as we're keeping it in check or utilizing it for the right things and not letting it spill over into something that's detrimental to us. And the same thing goes for like reading social cues and reading into things. If it's protecting you and it's offering you really valuable information for you to discern, like, is this a healthy relationship for me to be in? Is this a healthy work environment for me to be in? Like, that's good. It's good for you to think deeply about those things. It's good for you to notice those things and be able to like recognize in yourself, like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Something about this doesn't feel right, you know, and actually have, like, that's the thing. It's really hard to tell whether or not you're reading into something unnecessarily if you don't have the like educational knowledge base for what's a red flag and what's not a red, like what's a red flag and what's a green flag, etc. Because then if you don't have that information, then you're just left with like, oh my God, should I be overthinking this? I don't know. Should I be reading into this? I don't know. So what's actually like for me, like given me my sanity back and like actually helps me lean into the trait and have it be an incredibly useful thing in my life is educating myself on those types of things, like about what is a green flag and what is a red flag with a work situation or with any relationship, so that like I can very much tell very quickly if something is off that I need to take action on. The more I've learned about what is healthy and what isn't healthy in relationship dynamics and environments, the less problematic my sensitivity has been. And so that's a big part of like my teachings and, you know, what the messages I want to get out to the world for any HSPs looking to improve their lives and actually love being a highly sensitive person. This does not look like grass at all. This looks like 75 different campfires that are set up. Like it looks like there's like little wood and campfire, like the like TP set up. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, there goes my brain doing weird things, but it's a doodle. We don't care if it makes sense. This is just for me to like have something to do with my hands while I'm talking. Yeah, I hope that this is like helpful for you and not just like super rambly. I feel like I tend to talk in circles and it doesn't help that like my brain is also kind of split between talking to you and doing this weird doodle. Maybe I'll finish the grass and then we can keep chatting just because this is extremely, extremely tedious. Okay, so I finished the grass and yeah, so I guess the main takeaway from, you know, what I was just talking about is that the more that I've learned how to discern what is healthy and what is not healthy in all these different types of relationships and environments, and given myself that kind of education from, you know, maybe I didn't get these types of examples or wasn't really taught how to recognize them when I was younger, the more that I've learned those things, the more that I've developed my discernment skills about what's good for me and what isn't good for me, the less my sensitivity has become an issue and the more it's become an asset. You know, like your sensitivity is not a problem if you're in positive environment. Like going back to the beginning of this video, talking about the whole premise of what a highly sensitive person is that concept of being more influenced by your surroundings, good or bad. So I guess something else I'll talk about just from like my own experience as a highly sensitive person. When I became a teenager and got into high school, I feel like is when everything started to feel like all the aspects of my sensitivity started to feel like a problem. Because where I went to school, it was an incredibly challenging program. Like it was almost like college prep level where I grew up. And, you know, I don't know where you come from, how big your schools and stuff were, but like there was like 2,000 kids or something in my high school, and it was a 4-story building, and it was just like you go through the halls and there's just a gazillion kids, and you know, I just felt like I had no understanding of how sensitive I even was, like no conscious awareness of that, and no way to even understand what was happening to me when I would feel like I was just absorbing 2,000 kids worth of like drama and like emotions, and it was so overwhelming for me. And I would come home from school so exhausted, and I did and are still recovering from some like chronic health things. That was definitely a factor there. But I think for me, when I think about the term empath, that's the experience of my life that really comes to mind, is like absorbing people's emotions and stuff in close relationships, but also just being so overwhelmed by the school situation with that many kids. By the way, I know there aren't this many clouds in the sky, but like, because this is a doodle, I'm just covering the sky with clouds. Because it's nice and it's fun, and I'm sure it looks very chaotic, but we're gonna have this many clouds, is what I've decided. And again, I think part of the reason why all of that was so overwhelming is because I had no idea I was a highly sensitive person. I had no idea that I was paying more attention to people's social emotional cues and their, emotional experiences than the average person, and or even that I had this kind of like ability or skill set to like really pick up on those things. So because I didn't know that, I had no perception that I needed to like set energetic boundaries. And like the thing really is that when you're so outwardly focused on other people's experiences, you are like by default disconnected from your own. And that goes again back to like being told you're too sensitive, and to being like trained. Like, not only are you conditioned to look outside of yourself and focus on other people's experiences by being told things like you're too sensitive or whatever, but your brain as a highly sensitive person is also wired to pay close attention to social emotional cues. And again, you might think, well, that's clearly a bad thing, right? But if you're in really healthy relationships and you know how to discern those from the ones that are unhealthy, being really empathetic and paying attention to people's social emotional cues. Like, I had really good friendships in high school, and I know part of that was because I was so good at reading what was going on with people and being able to show up for them in a very supportive and attentive way. So I don't think that these types of tendencies that we have as HSPs are negative. It's all like situational, and all depends on your ability to discern and protect yourself, like I said earlier. The more you know how to discern and advocate for yourself, the less that being highly sensitive is an issue and becomes an asset. And going back to like, absorbing people's emotions, etc., this is like a huge topic, and I have plans to like make videos on this because there's just so much to talk about, but I'll just briefly like talk about my own philosophy. So like, my channel is, I claim, like I say, I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath. And even my logo, highly sensitive and empathic, is what this stands for. And by the way, if you really like this sweatshirt, you can get one of these. I'll put the link in the description. I say that I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath. And when I first found those two terms, I obviously was very like, oh my God, I finally understand myself. I really take pride in these things, which is kind of where the whole logo and me wanting to have this sweatshirt came from. Is like, I feel pride in these things now, and now that I understand myself and see all the cool things about being highly sensitive and being an empath. But the thing now is that I don't like the term empath is something that I'm not really sure that I feel as attached to or as much like I want to identify with it, because like, and again, this is just my perspective. So if and obviously like, this is still my logo, and I still feel pride in having this, be my logo and using that term, and wearing this sweatshirt, etc. But my understanding, like the way that I would differentiate the highly sensitive trait and being an empath, is that I felt like the empathic part of me was the part of me that absorbed people's emotions. Like, being a highly sensitive person to me felt very like, okay, this is based in science, this is a difference to my nervous system, a difference in my brain, etc. But the empathic part of me, like, that's not like a scientific term. It's kind of like a pop culture term that we've all like used to identify when we feel like we really, can absorb and pick up on other people's emotions. And the thing that I've realized after studying a lot of like psychology, nervous system, childhood wound, trauma type of stuff, is that that's kind of a stress response to unhealthy relationship dynamics. Again, like, if you're told these things and you're conditioned to kind of focus your energy and your conscious awareness and your concerns and your priorities and your preoccupation, whatever, with other people's emotions, then you kind of abandon yourself and you begin to like overly identify with other people's experiences. And the reason that I think this way now is because, I've seen this even experientially in my own life. Like, for a long time, I did not understand how to have energetic boundaries. And it was like the last thing about the highly sensitive trait, or being highly sensitive, although I shouldn't say that because I'm sure there's going to be more things I'm going to learn and discover as time goes on. But like for me, it felt like a big piece of the puzzle that I didn't quite figure out until like very recently about how to not absorb people's emotions. Because I would get that question from people, you know, like on my social medias and stuff about like, okay, so what's your solution for absorbing people's emotions? And I didn't really have an answer. I was like, this is something I still really struggle with within myself. But then as I did my own trauma healing and started working on like not abandoning myself and bringing kind of my energetic and emotional awareness more internally and rather than externally, that was a natural byproduct that I hadn't even intended, was that I stopped absorbing people's emotions, like not nearly as much at least as I used to. And it, you know, didn't occur to me until it was like suddenly one day I realized I wasn't doing that anymore. And I genuinely think it's because I started consciously pulling my energetic center or my conscious awareness or my emotional awareness, whatever word lands for you, out of other people and onto myself. So again, this is just kind of like my way of thinking about things, but once I kind of conceptualized and had the realization in my own mind that the like empath part of me was kind of an unhealthy trauma response, because it's not really good to absorb other people's emotions. Like it's good to be really cognizant of how other people are feeling, like I said earlier, to be able to better show up in relationships and like be a support for people. But absorbing other people's emotions is not beneficial for you or the other person involved, because in order to have a relationship with anyone, by default and by definition, that means that you are separate from them, right? That you are having a relation. You cannot have a relation. I mean, you can have a relationship with yourself, but even that, like the idea of a relationship is that there are two parties or two entities, and there's a connection between them and the way that they are interacting. That interaction, that thing that's happening, that connection between these two things is the relationship, right? And so like even with my logo, so this stands for highly sensitive and empathic, but it also has like quadrants of our lives. So like health is the H, spirituality is the S, the E is supposed to be for like money, but it's like an energy exchange is what the E is, and is my symbol for relationships. So it's like health, relationships, career, and spirituality. And the reason the and symbol is relationships is because it's like it takes two things to have a relationship between them, right? Like that's kind of the definition at its very core what a relationship even is. So like absorbing someone else's emotions and identifying with them and maybe taking on their issues or taking responsibility for them or losing yourself almost by default negates any sort of relationship because you've now merged. So if we can agree that like absorbing other people's emotions and abandoning yourself and overly identifying with someone else's experience and kind of merging with them in that way is not healthy, then you kind of start to realize like, okay, so maybe this empath part of me that I'm identifying with is actually something that needs to be healed, a relational wound that needs to be healed. And so that's at least just like my opinion. You know, and I still have the empath term in my content and in my, you know, YouTube banner and etc., because like I know there are a lot of people out there that identify with that term, and I want them to find me because I feel like what I have to say about that aspect of things can be really helpful for people. So even though I don't necessarily like I don't tell people I'm an empath anymore or whatever, and you know there's nothing wrong with identifying as an empath if that brings comfort and understanding to you, like if you feel a sense of pride or a sense of self-understanding or self-love because of that term, by all means, like keep using it. I'm just sharing from my perspective, from what I've learned as an HSP, as someone who used to identify as an empath, and learning about trauma responses and like healthy relationship dynamics, etc. That's kind of my opinion on it now, is that it just feels like that term, at least for me, is a relational wound, and I want to heal that. I want to love that part of myself. So, you know, there's no place for shame anywhere, right? Like we don't want to be feeling bad that we absorb other people's emotions or like berating ourselves for that. And again, like a whole other topic, highly sensitive people, like one of the common, you know, indications or like themes or even ways that people like identify that someone is an HSP is that they beat themselves up. Like that's just like part of being a highly sensitive person. And, you know, I have an entire video talking about this theory, so I won't like go too far into this, but there's so many negative, you know, quote, negative aspects of being a highly sensitive person that are actually like coping mechanisms, like ways that our highly sensitive trait has leaned into kind of a toxic way of operating that are the results of stressful relationships and environments. So like beating yourself up is not something that just comes with a trait. It's a result of your brain that deeply processes things and being like very conscientious and being very aware of other people's emotions and how you affect them, etc. Like that, when all of those kinds of very neutral, right, tendencies become stressed and like warped in unhealthy and toxic environments, then those things start to become like, we start criticizing ourselves and like not being able to let things go, etc. So, you know, beating yourself up is not like an inherent quality of being a highly sensitive person. It's the result of being a highly sensitive person in unhealthy environments and relationships that make you start to become like, it's a shame wound. Beating yourself up is a shame wound, you know, and that comes out of, again, like being in unhealthy relationship dynamics. And so for me, like, you know, as I've learned to heal, like as I've recognized, like, okay, I have some shame things happening. And as I've been healing that part of myself and like kind of working with my inner critic, that's not something that I feel like is happening. Like, you know, it's still something I'm working on, but I'm recognizing it diminish in my experience as a highly sensitive person as I've worked on my like shame wounds. And I'm still a highly sensitive person, right? Like that's never going to change, but these unhealthy ways that our HSP tendencies kind of lean towards these, you know, negative, challenging aspects of ourselves are not actually inherent to the trait. It's the result of someone who's highly sensitive adapting to unhealthy relationships and environments. So I guess for you, like the takeaway that I'm trying to articulate here is that if you are experiencing all these quote unquote negative aspects of the trait and you've been taught by the internet or whatever that they're normal, that they come with being highly sensitive, then I want you to recognize that they don't have to be regular aspects of your life. They're actually things that can be healed, like the empathic tendency to absorb other people's emotions. You can be a very supportive and attentive partner or friend or whatever and be very empathetic without crossing that line into the unhealthy behavior of actually taking on people's emotions. And when you heal the part of yourself that has a tendency to take on other people's emotions, that's no longer this like negative aspect of who you are or a challenge, then it becomes like all you're left with is the natural, neutral, you know, innate ability to be more cognizant of other people's feelings. And that is a really good thing. So I kind of want you to see this as like, you know, all of the inherent things that we have about ourselves as HSPs are like coins. And there's two sides of each coin. There's an incredible, you know, advantage and skill set that comes with it that can start to turn and flip and lean into kind of a negative challenge, coping mechanism, whatever, that can be healed so that those innate tendencies you have as a highly sensitive person become assets and not issues. Period. Mic drop. End of statement. I'm gonna finish this path because I'm just making like these noises, and then we'll continue. Okay, we're gonna put a little bit of little squigglies in the lake thing over here, whatever pond thing this is, and then we're gonna color in and we're gonna be done. I don't even know. None of this is like normal looking. I'm just doodling and trying to fill it in. So yeah, I hope that, you know, for any HSP watching, that maybe I've given you some ideas about ways in which, you know, your trait can actually be a good thing, or ways that you can reframe your experiences as an HSP to be more grateful or understanding or compassionate, and maybe it made you feel a little bit less alone in your experiences as an HSP. And you know, there are so many HSPs in the world. Like, it's unfortunate that we don't walk around with little signs on our foreheads that say we're HSPs, because there's like literally, the science used to say like 15 to 20%, and now I've seen some things saying up to 30%. So like that's a huge percentage of the population walking around with highly sensitive nervous systems. And it's a bummer that so many of us feel so alone when there's literally that many people walking around with highly sensitive nervous systems. And, you know, I kind of like to talk about this sometimes, that I think highly sensitive people are incredibly valuable, especially like we could get into a whole spiritual conversation, but like why we're even here and like how important HSPs are right now in the world. Like how much could we use people stepping into their power who are incredibly sympathetic and empathetic and care about animals and plants and the environment, and you know, just like being ethical, moral, conscientious people who have, you know, really good innovative ideas and insights and things to share. This is why I'm so passionate about helping highly sensitive people, is because not only do we deserve to live happy and healthy lives, but like we have so much to contribute that so many of us are not getting to contribute because we're so focused on just like surviving, because this world can be very challenging for sensitive people. If we are not in environments and relationships that are supportive to us, we spend all of our energy just trying to get through the day. And this is true for like non-HSPs too. When so many of us are just in survival mode, we're not able to show up and actually utilize our gifts in the world. All of our energy is just spent like trying to get through the day, which is such a like just so disheartening and such a disappointment, because like that's not why we didn't come here to just like struggle through all of our experiences and not be able to contribute. We came here to like experience life, like experience human life and enjoy ourselves and contribute and do meaningful things. And this is why I want so much for people to subscribe and follow me. And you know, if you're struggling and you're an HSP and you really just want to be able to enjoy life, like please take to heart what I'm sharing with you, if any of it resonates, and like utilize it in your life, because yeah, we deserve to be beyond survival mode and actually be able to share our gifts and experience all the benefits of being a highly sensitive person and not be lost in this sea of the challenges of being so sensitive, right? Okay, I'm gonna save this and now we're gonna color it in, which is gonna be fun. Okay, I'm gonna start with the lake area because we just finished that. I don't know why. I'm just gonna do that first. This is gonna be very like cartoony probably looking, but the whole thing is silly anyway, so who cares? So, you know, life as an HSP, there are definitely things I wish, you know, someone would create. Like, you know, there's something that I wish that did exist that would be created, which is the program that I made, because I was like, if I had had this when I was 14, I would have had an entirely different life experience to have all of these tools and things at my disposal. And also, you know, I had really wanted a card deck to exist that people could use to like practice their intuition. That was not the tarot. No shade again against the tarot. It's just, I wanted something that was more like self-improvement focused. Anyway, I have a card deck. That's somewhat different topic. But there are other things I've thought of that I wish would be created. Like, there's so many times where I'm like watching a TV show and the actual TV show that I'm watching is so much quieter than the damn commercials. So then you're like watching and you've got your volume all set how you want it to be, and then the commercial comes on and it's so freaking loud. And it's just, there just should be like a setting so that you can like either some sort of technology that like makes everything the same volume so that you're not like jarred. I don't know why my voice is cracking when you're watching something like as an HSP, or just like the ability to make the commercial. I mean, I guess they probably wouldn't allow us to create something that just like mutes the commercials. But yeah, and like, you know, I wish that something existed where people like, I wish there was a highly sensitive or a non-HSP that would just like become you know, be the volunteer to kind of screen things, like whether it's the news pieces of, you know, articles or whatever, or TV shows and movies that could put like a little HSP friendly warning, like non-HSP friendly warning on movies and TV shows. Although I guess that would get complicated because some HSPs are actually sensation seeking HSPs. Like I have one of my best friends who's an HSP is a sensation seeking HSP, and she like really enjoys watching thrillers and like horror movies, and I really, really don't. So I guess that's still kind of like, you know, different. Not every HSP is the same, right? But I do kind of wish there was some sort of warning that HSPs could use for stuff like that, and better volume controls. And I think there'd be more HSPs that would actually be like involved with more of the news if it was easier to stomach, frankly. Like I think if there was a non-HSP kind of like filtering the news and, you know, rewriting it or whatever, like packaging it in a way that's, yeah, easier to digest, I think that there would be people, more HSPs, who would be able to like watch the news, because I think it's just really intense to be bombarded with news that's like really hard to stomach, and then it makes us like not, like, seems like we don't care because we're not staying in touch with things. But it's just because it's, especially when you're in survival mode yourself, and it's just really darn hard to, yeah, to like just be bombarded with what's going on in the world, when it's just, it's hard enough to like deal with your own problems, you know? So anyway, those are the things I wish that would exist for HSPs. This is kind of cool looking. I know it doesn't really make sense because it's a weird doodle, but I kind of like how it looks. But yeah, and then I guess something else that I can talk about is that there are a lot of HSP, like I think that, you know, and I was guilty of this too. When I first learned about the trait, it was like so unbelievably validating and like made me feel so understood to find out about the HSP trait, that I kind of went into this like, oh my God, I finally feel understood, and only HSPs will understand these things. And like, again, this is another video I want to make about, there's so many like pieces of content out there that are like, only HSPs will understand blah, blah, blah. And I think that's really detrimental, because it kind of, it basically drives an even further, deeper wedge between HSPs and non-HSPs. Because there are plenty of things like, while non-HSPs very likely have a different experience than us in terms of how much they absorb things from their surroundings, because like that is the fundamental difference between us and non-HSPs. There's plenty of non-HSPs that, you know, do get overwhelmed and have like similar experiences of just like feeling like their surroundings are affecting them, and that they're, you know, having a deep emotional experience or whatever it is. So I think it's important for us to be able to understand ourselves in context, you know, but I also think it's important for us to remember that we're all human. We're all experiencing the human experience, and just because a person is not highly sensitive does not mean that they cannot relate to you in some way. And yeah, so I think that's an important thing to mention. What else can we talk about with the few minutes I've got left to color this baby in? Life as a highly sensitive person. I actually think like one of the most rewarding things in my life has been my relationship with my animals. And I do think that that's something that seems to be, like, I know a lot of HSPs that feel very connected to animals. And yeah, I think that the more that you like view the highly sensitive trait as being a challenge and like get fixated on like the sensitivity being the problem, it's like you kind of rob yourself of the ability to see the beauty in it. And, you know, I know that being a highly sensitive person can be very challenging. Believe me, that's kind of how I got into all of this. And I don't want to invalidate anyone by saying like, oh, you know, just focus on the positive, because there's toxic positivity and whatever. I definitely don't want to get into that. Like, don't want to do that to people. But I just want to encourage you to, like, if this is helpful, to not only see the ways that your highly sensitive trait can benefit you, but to see the negative, challenging aspects of it as parts of you that can be healed and soothed, to where you don't, it does not have to be a part of your experience as an HSP to absorb people's emotions, or, you know, beating yourself up, or being overwhelmed all the time, you know, not being able to relax. I guess one of the main things that I want HSPs out there to know is that life doesn't have to suck. Life doesn't have to suck as an HSP, you know? And a lot of that has to do with, oh, I just totally undid the whole thing. Us being stressed and being in relationships and environments that are not good for us, and not understanding that they're not good for us, and not knowing how to speak up for ourselves, and being so disconnected from our own wants and needs and feelings because of what we were conditioned to believe about ourselves and believe about what's possible for us. Like, being highly sensitive can be a beautiful thing. And the more you heal the ways in which your trait is showing up in a stressed way, like anyone's personality traits, like whether you're an HSP or not, are going to show up in negative ways when you're stressed, and positive ways when you're feeling supported, right? That's very true, you know? So I would much rather you view the challenging aspects of your trait as stress responses than like inherent aspects of who you are, because that's true. Like, as you heal and calm your nervous system and give yourself what it is that you need, and get out of like perpetually stressful relationships and environments, the challenges of the trait calm down. They genuinely do. And like, that's, I guess, the message is like, I want to give HSPs hope that you can actually heal those things and really, really enjoy your life as a highly sensitive person. gonna make a little bit of some doodads here. So, you know, if you haven't subscribed, I hope that you will become a part of the little community that I'm building here. I genuinely just like really want to make a safe space for highly sensitive people to learn and grow and learn about these things and just kind of like get the word out there. You know, this trait is relatively new in terms of like people's awareness around it. And someday maybe I'll make more content for like people who aren't highly sensitive that like want to maybe better understand the experiences of highly sensitive people. But like the main thing is that I want HSPs to feel resourced and understand themselves, you know, and it's also why I created the course that I made. So like the course that I made is kind of a just absolute labor of love. It took me like, I don't even know, 2 years to complete it. And it's got over 160 video modules on things like, you know, self-care practice and setting boundaries in relationships and identifying your dream career and how to pursue that, and even like, you know, things about like nutrition and using food as medicine, and even like manifestation. Like there's just so much stuff in there, like literally anything that I've ever come across along my own journey that seemed like it was useful for living a good life as a highly sensitive person, it's in there. And there's a little community where you can like message me and message other people in the community and feel like there's a sense of camaraderie, that there are other people on the same journey as you are in life and in the effort to improve your life. So it's all around just, I would love, you know, if you're really serious about improving your life as an HSP, I really would love to have you in there. It's on a membership basis, so you join 1 month at a time, like you join whatever, and then you can stay for as long as you would like, and you pay 1 month at a time. And you get access to all of these cool resources and video modules, and there's exercises that kind of help you, guide you along the way to like actually implement these things into your life, you know, journaling prompts to deepen what you learn. And you also get access to me, you know, through as your coach. Lots of benefits of being in there. So that's for people who are like really serious that they want to take action and make progress in their life. And then of course I've got all this stuff on my channel to check out. And this is looking pretty cool. I wasn't quite sure at the beginning of this that this was gonna like not look like crap. You know, beating myself up a little bit. It kind of looks cool. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. Yeah, and if you haven't liked this video or left a comment, I would love for you to do that. You know, for any of you that aren't aware, the YouTube algorithm basically uses those types of engagement metrics to decide whether or not to push a video out to other people. And, you know, my mission is to reach as many HSPs as I can to kind of help them with their mindset and give them the tools and resources they need to thrive. So if you would give it a like or a comment if you are so inclined, that would be very cool of you. Maybe I'll put some flowers in here. Should I add some flowers to the grass? Let's see. Let's do little pink flowers. Or should they be in the bushes? Maybe they should be like alongside the bushes. There we go. What else is there to say? I don't know. If there's any topics in this video that I did not cover that you would like to hear about as an HSP, you know, always taking suggestions for content that you want me to make on this channel. So please let me know in the comments things that you would like me to talk about in future videos. And, you know, if you want to share like your experiences as an HSP or your own like theories or really whatever, I would love to hear from you guys. You know, tell me about what life has been like for you as an HSP. Just gonna put some yellers in here. Maybe we should put some little cattails by the water here. Maybe that'll be the last thing that I do. If it's the last thing that I do, I will put cattails on. Oh, those are too big. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's super long. If you even like got to the end, you know, congrats. Actually, if you got to the end, I will give you just as a reward, $50 off your first 3 months of the membership if you're interested. The code would be YouTube50 that you could use at checkout. If you have any questions about my programs or offerings, also leave them in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my little doodle, and I'll see you in the next one.